Hello everyone and welcome back in the second season of the Data Roll podcast. And today I am joined by Dr. Andreas Ditsche, who is the CEO of iGaming.com, an affiliation. And by the way, Andreas also teaches ethics at university, and this is going to be the main topic for the day. So ethics, reputation, and community in the iGaming sphere. Andreas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stanislav. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off with a quick intro. Andreas, if you would allow for a few key lines about yourself, what is your key focus within your company, within your extra additional activities outside of the work as well, and your responsibilities. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I have an accent. My accent is German. I work and live in Germany, and I am a newcomer to the iGaming industry. My background is an MBA, some time with a Big Four auditing firm, and I spent most of my career in industrial companies. So we made production lines for cars and aircraft. We manufactured power tools, provided maintenance for trains. So I was a pretty seasoned CEO with 10 years in restructuring and working with private equity when I came across iGaming. iGaming.com is my current employer. iGaming.com is far smaller than other companies I've worked before. So what was exciting about it? iGaming had grown rapidly. The company needed structure and leadership, and they were looking for an experienced manager from the old economy, which is me. And in addition to my industrial career, I've been teaching at universities on the side for many, many years. And when I was interviewing for my iGaming job, I had an offer on the table to become a professor at a university. So after 25 years in line functions, that was tempting, admittedly. Long story short, iGaming allowed me to combine the job at iGaming and a university job. So I started in a CEO role and a professorship for management. So that's what brought me to this industry. iGaming is an affiliate marketing company. We operate purely in the iGaming industry, and I'm proud to say we are the most significant non-stock listed affiliate in our niche.
Wow. And so actually, let me ask you with a franchise, a quite open question. How is that even possible that you can combine these two aspects of one side teaching ethics and on the other side working for an iGaming industry?
Yeah, guess what? You are not the first one to ask that question. Many people ask me, you teach ethics, you work in the iGaming industry, and eyebrows are raised because this is perceived as a contradiction. For me, this is understandable, considering the reputation of this industry. So let me tell you the true story. I live in Marburg, a wonderful small town near Frankfurt. And one day I talked to the University of Gießen, just 20 minutes from my home. They had an opening for ethics in management. Guess what? They asked if I'd be interested. And I was, because of this contradiction. When I mentioned this to a colleague, she was astonished. She said something like, do they know what you do for a living, what your job is? This is like letting a chauvinist teach diversity. And since then, I teach ethics and diversity. So I love it.
So you have the mix and the combination that actually fuels each other.
Absolutely. And it's interesting every day.
And so speaking of the reputation, as you have mentioned, we are facing the negative reputation in so many places when it comes to online gambling, be it online or land-based as well. And how, from your perspective, is it proportionate when it comes to what is perceived and what is, at the end of the day, the final outcome, and vice versa?
So first of all, gambling in general has a reputation problem. And here's my personal view. I find it okay when people say that gambling should be restricted or even forbidden, like smoking or alcohol consumption. The negative impacts of gambling can be dramatic. People can lose a fortune, ruin their lives, destroy their relationships. However, concluding that the people working in this industry are generally without ethics and morale, not to say criminal minds, this is not appropriate. I met so many people in the industry who care that I'm convinced that this stereotype is not helpful at all. So I really believe we must have a clear distinction between people and the industry.
And actually, when I was taking the metro to the office today in the morning, I came up with this, let's say, comparison that often when it comes to transportation modes, because speaking of transportation, you have on one hand the car industry and the road transportation, which gets, for instance, quite a lot of accidents, incidents, etc. But whenever there's something that hits makes the headlines and gets a lot of media attention, it's usually about aircrafts. And we've had recently the crash of the airplane in India, which brought a lot of attention. But usually when we take a look at, perhaps it's not always the most fortunate comparison, but at the end of the day, if you take a look at the numbers, you will realize that there's more victims of road accidents. Do you feel that it would be justified to have similar comparison when it comes, for example, to the gambling as for other addictions? It's an open question.
I agree to a certain extent, and I like the parallel that you have painted. When we look into gambling, the accident is problem gambling. It's losing your fortune or ruining your relationships. And even if you take the higher numbers of the researchers, it's a relatively small percentage of everyone who plays. In my view, we have to make sure that we do not criminalize gambling, because if you feel you cannot speak about the fact that you gamble openly, you are pushed into the dark, and it gets so much more difficult to ask for help, to speak about it when it's stigmatized, that I like the parallel. Of course, it's super sad when airplanes crash, but on the other hand, nobody reports about car accidents anymore because it's so frequent. So the tip of an iceberg is not the best thing to assess the whole situation.
And when it comes to the differences between regions, countries, and cultures, not only about the ability to speak up and to share the experiences, but generally of the perception of iGaming, what's your take on this?
Well, I would say there are vast differences between countries and cultures. So looking at Germany, you hardly ever see positive news about this industry. If there's news at all, it's something that happens in the dark. It's bad news. It's drama. But you hardly ever see people who speak openly about the fact that they gamble. When I look at another country, Spain, where we are just preparing a presentation of us at a conference, it's very much accepted in society that you play. More than 80% of the adult population gamble regularly. And the big difference there is it's seen as entertainment by most people. It's not this, oh, I want to become a millionaire, I want to win, or I want to recover my losses. It's, I know that I will lose. I buy entertainment for an hour or two, and when the money is spent, and that's a statistical fact, you will always lose. It's the same like a movie ticket or making a reservation for a dinner table. I know that this sounds very lighthearted because drama starts also with a low entry barrier. However, if you have educated players who know that in the end they will lose money, they are less prone to becoming a problem gambler. And thinking about Spain, I think it's also interesting to mention that big reason to play is to cover problems that you have. When you are stressed out at work, fear for your job, or your relationship went down the drain, your escape is gambling. So when you are happy, when you are in a good mood, you are way less at risk to gamble. And maybe that is a difference between the Spanish, who have sunshine, and the Germans, who always complain about something.
But not only about the weather, but also about other ethical challenges that go along. What do you think are the biggest ethical challenges in the industry as of today?
Let me start with this. Players must be protected. They can only be protected when they are well educated, know the risks of gambling, and when they have access to help. To ensure such a protection, players must be in the legal licensed market, not in the black market where they are invisible. And here comes the ethical challenge. If legal gambling is not attractive enough, players will seek their pleasure in the illegal market. So, two numbers as an example, in the Netherlands about 50% play in the black market. According to latest numbers I've heard at a conference, this ratio of black market players is closer to 80% in Germany. So, and how, if you were a politician, how would you drive a regime where you say, let's make the legal market more attractive, that more people play, and 2 weeks later you have the headline, this politician tripled gambling in a country. This is not what you want to engage with, and I would say this is a good example of the dilemma, of the ethical challenge that you have also as a regulator.
Right, because it's either one way or another, and if you want to actually protect more players, you need to bring them back to the table, but bringing them back to the table means that you need to entice them.
Yes, it's a thin red line between making a market attractive or strike back with repressive action. I do not believe in repressive action because we are in the online world. What can you do to enforce it?
Like water will find its way, players will find the way.
Wise words.
And for operators, what can be done? How can the operators be more transparent and earn that trust? Because you mentioned the regulation. Regulation goes beyond the actors who participate in the market. But looking at the market actors like operators, would you name something?
Yes. So when you operate in legal markets, transparency and trust are mandatory to attract players. That's your selling proposition. Other odds, like the attractiveness of games, the return to players, which is often lower than in the black market due to taxation, these are odds against the operators, but they cannot do much about it. So operators must be crystal clear about facts. They must inform about risks. They must provide data. They must stay away from enticing problem gamblers, underage people, and vulnerable groups. And, of course, they must be totally reliable when winnings are to be paid out. I think this is one of the few fears people have when they play in the black market, that if they have the jackpot, the money does not arrive on their bank account.
Or at least there starts to be many difficulties and formalities on the way, and suddenly it takes much more time. And wow, this reminds me of a story we had in Poland for one of the sportsbook operators, because in Poland the online casino is monopolized by the state, but we have licensed operators for sportsbook. And actually what happened once was that one of the legal operators, in some way, I cannot recall the details, but they either prevented or they extended the time or asked for specific formalities before allowing a specific player to withdraw. And this has drawn a lot of attention from other legal operators, because basically that one company was ruining the reputation of the others, because then what would be the next thought? That person, that player speaks out loud, and then the whole industry gets hit.
Fair point, because you have no legal handle. So in my country, Germany, if as a player you engage in playing with an unlicensed operator, that's a criminal offense for yourself. So if the bank collects a big winning for you, they have to inform the public prosecutor. And so you might get 2 letters on that day, which is, I think that's the biggest fear of people if they know that there is an issue at all, that something goes wrong with the winnings.
Mm-hmm. And what about the folks that are in the affiliation sector and other actors of the gaming space outside of operators?
Yeah, so let's start with the affiliates. I work for one myself, and we must be responsible. As an affiliate, we are the last stepping stone for players before they move on to an operator. And with the borderless internet, affiliates must take an ethical decision. They must sacrifice revenues and profits by restricting themselves to the legal licensed market. I'm very sorry to say that, but you hear of affiliates who make much more money when they do not restrict themselves to the legal market. So for the good ones, that means only a fraction of the total market can be assessed. But who are the other actors? Let me mention the lawmakers and the regulators as well. Their challenge is the balance between repression and allowing an attractive legal market. And I believe open information will earn trust. Everyone has to make transparent what their thought process is. I would always say the lawmakers, the regulators, they have good intentions, but I'd also say the level of success, which I partly measure in channelization, is very different across different regimes.
So this is more or less like the story you have mentioned about eating tofu and the stacks, yeah?
Yeah, you like that one, right? So I use that on stage in order to explain if you can, let's say, stop people from gambling by making it less attractive, which I have recently heard in another conference where experts said this is the most robust way to make sure that people are not lost in this market. And my example is, if I am someone who loves to eat a juicy steak, and if my partner thinks I shouldn't do it, and if she calls the restaurant and say, cook it through, make it smaller, make it less tasty, will I still eat it? Or will I order tofu, which I don't like? Or will I go to another restaurant? And I'm absolutely convinced I would look for another restaurant. And I'm afraid most players who do not find what they want in the legal market, they will seconds later be in the black market where they get it. Some might notice that it's the black market, and others will just look for an offering and might not even know in which market they are.
And so if we know that the solution is not to make the stack too salty or too small or too burnt, then what would be the solution to make the responsible gaming work for real, and so that it's not only something written on a piece of paper on a code of conduct that has been signed off and then forgotten, but something that lives within the organizations, within the industry, and can for real protect those who are in the need of that protection?
We need a joint effort. We can only ensure responsible gambling when the stakeholders work together. That's operators, affiliates, Google, lawmakers, regulators, and the players. So we must reach the mind of the players. Criminalizing them and building up walls will not fix it. And I love to say we cannot stop human beings from playing. We are homo ludens, that is our nature. And to explain it, I always use this almost poetic thing. Trying to stop human beings from playing is like trying to stop heartbreak by banning love. It's not the best and most efficient idea. So what can we do? We must create a proper environment. Obviously, not even the fact that playing with an illegal operator is a criminal offense by the player holds back players from the black market in Germany. And to me, that is the worst threat. So if you do not get your winning, okay. But if you are handcuffed and brought to court, I'm exaggerating a little bit. It will be a penalty first, but that would be the worst. And for player protection, it's often suggested to make the online market less attractive. And to me, that is not as easy and efficient as it sounds. And I have already given the example of the juicy steak. The explanation to me is that simple why it doesn't work.
Let's talk a little bit about the data, because you're also leveraging data in your decision making. And I'm curious, what's your point about the player behavior and the data that can be leveraged for the player behavior, for tracking and enabling this player protection? So what kind of player behavior, for example, the operators should track for protecting the players?
So there is abundant research about player behavior and its correlation to problem gambling. If it's causality, I'm not so sure, but at least there's a clear correlation. And in a nutshell, problem gamblers need the thrill. So they often increase their gambling frequency, they increase the amounts they put at stake, And often when they reach their limits, they increase the limits. So these are all things that operators can monitor and measure. Even the time of the day of playing can indicate problem gamblers. Furthermore, certain groups are more likely to become problem gamblers. Statistically, it's young men with low income and poor education. That's the biggest risk group. And also there, you have indicators. If they only slightly increase their limits, you assume the pockets are not too deep. And if players can be detected by that, you have a fair chance of identifying those who are at risk. And I can give an example. I've recently attended a snus, it's a Norwegian word that I cannot translate, conference in Norway. And a big government-run operator gave an example how they use the data and what they do. And they monitor the behavior, and then they send letters, physical letters in paper, which most of us are not used to anymore. But that has a massive response effect. They offer help. If they don't get a feedback, they reach out by phone. And this is extremely well received by the players. So the ratio of players that talk to them, changed their opinion, was somewhere between 30 and 50%, which I find amazing. So it's possible. And on a personal note, I'm a scientist to a certain extent. I think it's more important to act than to debate what the ratio of false positives or false negatives in your statistics is. Rather talk to one person too many than missing one out.
Yeah, and one more aspect comes to the picture because, for example, in the DSM-5 criteria for addiction, be it other, but gambling especially, well, we have aspects such as chasing losses, which is easily quantifiable because we can see that in the data somebody depleted their account and then they topped up because they had a huge loss over that day and they want to recover from it. At least a recover is a quote, recover unquote, of course. Also, if somebody needs more thrill and more stimulation, let's say, they will likely increase the bet sizes. For example, these are easy to measure, easy to capture, a bit harder to process if you have tons of data, but everything remains is possible with the technology. Now, we have certain aspects which are less tangible. For example, escapism and escaping from reality.
Yes.
I struggle to imagine how we can capture that in the data. Or even one more when it comes to, I don't recall how it was exactly named, but it was related to ruining the relationships. So I could imagine a situation where customer service gets phone call from the spouse of the player. That could be captured, but we are touching such a delicate area, which is sometimes hard to measure. And do you see that it's even possible to address when we speak about things which are not that tangible?
I think you need the cooperation of the gambler in order to do that. So understanding for himself or herself that there's an issue is the first step. And we live in free societies with data protection. So I would say beyond the data an operator can collect by watching a player play, we are very limited. And you are raising a good point. If you play in the dark, alone, socially isolated, it's super unlikely that your friends tell you, oh, you have changed your behavior, what is going on. Gambling is one of the issues that can remain undetected for years. If you have an alcohol issue, one day somebody will smell your breath. Or if you have a drug problem, you look like you have one. In gambling, that's very different. And rather than looking at analytics, in my opinion, being more open to discuss the whole situation, to bring it to the surface, allow people to talk about it and say, we do gamble, maybe it's a problem or not. Even if you would gamble in a group, the chances are higher that a friend of yours says, what are you doing there? Think twice. But that's not what we do, because most of us have a smartphone and play somewhere without telling anyone. Especially not when you lose money, you want to tell good stories. So an unsolvable issue by data.
And I've seen research that supported the idea that people overestimate their winnings when it comes to the past memories. And when confronted to the final outcome on the wallet, people were usually overstating what was their end result, that they were usually reporting and believing that they won much more than it was in reality. And one more question, when it comes to the perspective of affiliation, what are the insights when related to the players that you gather and extract from the data?
For us as an affiliate, we have access to what people are searching for. Our name of the game is keywords. So we must optimize our domains that, as long as it's still Google and not ChatGPT or something else, that people find on our websites what they are looking for. So we have done quite detailed research. We looked into 250,000 keyword searches, and I've noted down the numbers, which is interesting for Germany. Out of the top 40 keywords, only 23% are searches for legal keywords in Germany. Only about 1 out of 4. And interestingly, the word casino is forbidden to use for online slots in Germany. It's a good intention of the lawmaker. It's for the avoidance of confusion and mixing things up. However, 47% of the keyword search is a search for the word casino. So it first shows language police doesn't work. And I would be surprised if people know that this word is not to be used. And the third important number for me is there's about 30% of the keywords that explicitly search for illegal products. These are these things without limits, without waiting time, without taxation, without registration, completely illegal. People look for it. So that's the German situation. When I look at another example, Spain, here gambling is more accepted. It's accepted as entertainment. And this is also reflected in the search patterns. So in Spain, we did an experiment. We focused on the keywords legal, official, regulated. And focusing on that made a domain skyrocketing. So we just took out all the rocket science information like what is my best RTP and what can I win and how far does it go, when do I get my money back. Just the fact that it's legal, official and regulated was enough to drive people into that product offering. And to me, that was so striking in terms of how the psyche works in Germany as opposed to Spain, that I always love when our team does such comparisons and research.
When the environment and the whole legal framework and setup actually influences the way people perform their searches.
Absolutely. And to have an analogy, I think for some people it's super appealing to have a forbidden fruit. So if it's on the edge, people are attracted. And if it's in the open, probably people have a more relaxed approach. And I hear that, for example, from students who sit in groups of 5 or 6, have a slot on their big TV screen and watch it. And it seems like they collect a little bit of money. They bet it, and when it's over, it's over. And they are not alone. For them, it's entertainment. So I think this social effect, if we can get people out of isolation, we might have already achieved a lot.
Okay, I got a final one for you. What have you learned from your audience? Are people more open to talking about gambling today?
That is a matter of generations. So young people are more open. When I talk to students, gambling is entertainment. What I also have to notice when I talk to students, individually, each one feels, oh, I'm not at risk. On the other hand, many say we need strong boundaries, and many also say we should forbid it completely. So at least they talk about it in a very relaxed way. What I also notice from the young people, enforcement, they perceive as a toothless tiger. They do not care if it's legal or not, because they say it's the internet, nobody will catch us, whatever we do. And the general public in Germany is less open. Unless the topic is gambling harm or news from a shady world, there is no news about gambling. There is no positive news. And when you look at ESG, I would say I don't know any media that is pushing forward, because that could be perceived as advertising and promoting the bad thing. So I would say, if I summarize my opinion on that, gambling should be talked about more openly. The less shady this industry is perceived, the better it can be regulated, the better players can be protected, the better taxes can be collected, and the better societal help for problem gamblers can be organized. I think we have to make this industry less shady to protect the players.
Wow, that's a nice note to wrap it all up. Thanks a lot, Andreas, for today.
Thank you so much, Stan, for the podcast. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope to see you soon at another conference or maybe in Berlin.
Thank you a lot, and we will certainly see each other pretty soon. So, guys, we've covered the ins and outs of ethics, reputation, and community building in iGaming. That's going to be it for today, for our episode. This was Stan. I'm signing off for now. And remember, keep rolling with the data.